to record?
Allow who to record?
Kalita Bhavana to record the video.
I think so.
Okay.
No, he's shaking his finger.
Allow him to record?
Allow who to record?
Kalita Bhavana to record the video.
I think so.
So this is the translator, and then there is...
No, he's shaking his finger.
Oh, it's not somebody else is doing it?
No, that's us talking. Allow who to record?
Because I only see Kali Yuga Bhavana.
I think so.
This is the translator, and then there is... Did you change your
No,
name?
he's shaking his finger.
Oh, it's not somebody else is doing it?
No, that's us talking. Allow who to record?
Because I only see Kali Yuga
Looks like it's
Bhavana.
from
This is the translator, and then there is... Did you change your
No,
name?
he's shaking his finger.
Oh, it's Bhavandas. Okay,
somebody else
there it
is,
is.
doing it. No.
Allowed to record local files.
Turn the sound off on YouTube.
You gotta ping yourself.
It says turn the sound off on
Oh, it's
YouTube.
Bhavandas.
Oh, this is cool.
That's why I hope you understand now. Ping yourself, yeah.
Okay, it's all working now?
I don't know what you've done. Let's see, the translator is allowed. It says that it's Padmanabh Maharaj.
Okay, well, I'll just have to change that.
Yeah.
Rename. Okay. Okay, sorry guys. I guess I'm a little stubborn too because I didn't leave it going. So it's 10:32. We can start. Welcome, my name is Gaurasundara Das. I'm going to speak on the third verse of the Shakshastakam. Padmanabh Maharaj asked me to give classes for this time leading up to Gaur Purnima. So I agreed, and he gave a couple suggestions of what I should speak on, and this was one of them. And I kind of chose to do this one not because I have really any insight or skill in this third verse or any of the qualities listed, but just because these are things that I need to practice mostly for myself. The third verse is of course very famous. So anyhow, I'll just start by saying a little Mangala Charan. Om Jnana Timirandasya Dhyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Siddhantotpala Nityarasikam Hamsam Vilasatmakam Audayakya Sudama Sevakadanam Vishramba Bhakti Param Yachna Yukti Vichakshanam Tagavido Vaishishta Shaktya Sada Vande Ham Tripurari Namakayatim Shri Bhakti Vedantinam Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Sahodito Gaurudai Pushpavanto Chitro Shando Tamonudo Vande Ham Shri Rama Krishna Abhaya Charanastako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subalapriyo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, so like I was mentioning, I chose this subject not because I have any accomplishments or insights into it, but mostly because I need to improve these things in myself, and I thought it would be a good thing for me to spend some time thinking and meditating on this verse and figuring out how I could apply them into my own life. So of course I'm talking about the third verse of the Shikshastakam, which we're all familiar with, I'm sure. Trinada Pisunichena Taroriva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. It's a verse that we all know. It's very beautiful, a very simple verse. It's probably the most famous verse in the Shikshastakam. The Shikshastakam, of course, this is where we find the verse primarily, is one of the only things composed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. The Shikshastakam as a whole is very important because it comes as the very conclusion of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The whole book ends kind of on the note of Mahaprabhu's verses of the Shikshastakam. And in the Shikshastakam, actually, Mahaprabhu, we see that he achieved his aim of becoming, feeling what Radha feels by stepping into the role of one of her maidservants. So it's a very powerful astakam. Astakam means eight verses. And it's one of the other reason why it's so important is because, being Gaudiya Vaishnavas, followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's one of the very few things that are attributed to his own hand, to his own writing. There's a few other verses, I think, that have been attributed to him. The ones that I know of are the Naham Vipro Nacha Narapatir Napi verse that we sing, that we chant before going on the altar or doing puja. I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not part of the Varnashram, but I am the servant of the servant of Krishna, that verse. And then the other one, which is one that Gumaraj often likes to quote, is Shrotam api Upanishadam dure harikatamrita. So this is another verse that's been attributed to Mahaprabhu, where he says that the talks of Harikatha are far from the sounds of the Upanishads. So besides these two verses, I think the only other ones that are attributed to Mahaprabhu himself are the verses of the Shikshastakam. All other sampradayas have very lengthy commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra in order to establish themselves. Mahaprabhu found that this had already been done in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and so he kind of deferred to that. And so as the founder of the Sampradaya, he didn't leave a whole whack of written works. Certainly his followers, the six Goswamis and on, there's a huge tradition of commentary and original compositions and whatnot in our lineage. But as for the founder himself, he didn't write too much, and that being because he taught mostly through his example. He felt that the Bhagavatam was a perfect commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, so there was no need to do that. And then he taught primarily through his example. Gumaraj likes to refer to the Chaitanya Leelas as the Acharya Leela, so the Leela of teaching by example. It's commonly said, actions speak louder than words. Actions speak louder of precepts. Actions speak louder than precepts. And when we look at Mahaprabhu's life and we look at Mahaprabhu's behavior and dealings and whatnot, his actions, we see the very embodiment of this verse, this third verse of Shikshastakam, which I think I didn't say the English of it, but basically it means, I'll read Gumaraj's translation of it. So it's Trinadapi Sunichena Taroriva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sada Hari. Gumaraj translates it in his commentary on Shikshastakam as being humble like a blade of grass, being more tolerant than a tree, expecting no admiration, yet showing others veneration. One should glorify Hari constantly. So I didn't read the English of it. So Mahaprabhu clearly, through his just studying his character, his leelas, his behavior, his interactions with his devotees and whatnot, is very, very much the embodiment of this verse, as are, all the great devotees in our line. It's actually a description of how one achieves offenseless chanting, and it's also a description of the character of those who are chanting offenselessly. So all the great devotees, we see these types of qualities, and Rupa and Sanatan especially. I'd like to talk about them a little bit later, because they're very character study of humility, but we see it all in all of them, Krishnadas Kaviraj, etc. So, like I said, he was the very, very embodiment of this verse primarily, and of course of all of his teachings. The Shakshastakam itself is shiksha, of course, means instruction or teaching. Astakam, 8 verses. So these are these are prayers of instruction or prayers of teachings of Mahaprabhu. They're instructions on how to perfect the chanting of the Mahamantra, which was, his main teaching, his main emphasis. And they're also, a very beautiful window into Mahaprabhu himself, into his own feelings in relation to chanting the name, and to his own experiences in chanting the name. These verses are him explaining what he's feeling in relation to the holy name. Bhaktivinoda interestingly comments that the Shikshastakam itself, that the prayers of the Shikshastakam reveal the Leelas of Radha and Krishna, and this is because they reveal the bhajan the bhajan that leads to that, the way and the worship that leads entrance into the Leelas of Radha and Krishna. So these verses of Shikshastakam are very important to us. Guru Maharaj has, mentioned that they're like a roadmap of in the land of faith, which, the land of faith. The faith is a little bit more intangible than this realm. So it's very helpful for us to have some kind of roadmap, markers or lamp, posts along the way, so that we can orient ourselves and know which direction we're going, which direction perhaps we should be going, that we're not going, etc. So it describes this progression, beginning with Shraddha, initial faith, through all the various stages of devotional culture, condensing ultimately to the stage of prema. So we know these stages. They're found in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. They're found in the Bhagavad itself, actually, in the second chapter of the first canto. This progression from Shraddha to prema, and this is kind of the journey that we're undertaking right now. These are also these are also Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's final instructions. Like I mentioned, they come at the very end of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this is kind of like, this comes out in the height of his ecstasy, this Shikshastakam. He's surrounded only by his very, very close, intimate devotees, Srup Damodar Goswami and Rai Ramananda. And so it's a very, it's like the culmination of the whole book. It's the conclusion of the whole book, and it's in a very, very intimate setting. So these are very special verses. Mahaprabhu revealing his realizations in his heart. So they're very important, and the verse that I want to speak about, of course, falls within these verses. I have been told that they originally appear in the Padyavali in a different arrangement, and that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami took these verses and arranged them in the order that we know today, that we find them in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it's a very unique astakam. Most astakams have the same meter, right? When we think of like Damodar astakam or Gurvastakam, each verse follows the same meter, but this one is a little different. Each verse has a bit of a different makeup, a different meter, and the verse that we're discussing today, the Trinada P verse, is nice because it's actually it's in the most simple of meters. I forget what the name of it is, but it's very easy to remember, very easy to recite. Only four lines, and for me this was like really one of its charms, just that it was such a simple verse, such a simple description, easy to remember, easy to recite. So it's very, very beautiful. But the whole Shikshastakam itself is, Guru Maharaj ends his commentary on the Shikshastakam saying this. He says, let's see. just simple. But he says the whole Shakshastakam is worthy. It's what is it? He says Sri Shakshastakam should be recited daily, and its deep meaning should be contemplated over and over again. So this is very nice. I think in ISKCON they chant the Shikshastakam every morning. So I thought I would just recite this Shikshastakam for my own benefit, and also because I think it's important to see where this Trinadapi verse falls within the Shikshastakam itself. That's the context in which we find it, and the stage that it corresponds to, the solutions that it provides for some of the impediments that we find earlier on. So if you'll just humor me, I'm gonna recite this Shikshastakam at the beginning of every class. I'll do it a little bit faster in the next couple of ones, but those Cheto Darpana Marjanam Baba Mahadavagni Nirvapanam Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Punamrita Svadanam Saratma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakadi Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktish Atrarpita Niyamita Smarane Nakalaha Etadrishitava Kripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaivam Idisham Ihajani Nanuragaha Trinadapi Sunichena Taroriva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitamba Jagarisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmani Ishware Bhavatad Bhaktira Haituki Tvai Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stita Duli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galadashu Daraya Vadanam Gadgadaru Daigira Pulakarnichitam Vapukada Tabanama Grahane Bhavishyati Yugaitam Nimishena Chakshusha Pravishayitam Shunyaitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahename Ashlishyava Padam Ratam Pinashtumam Adarshanam Mamahatam Karotuva Yatatatava Vidatulam Pato Matprananatastu Sa Eva Napadaha. So as you can see, the third verse out of all the verses there is really the simplest and easiest to remember. Where we find it in the Shikshastakam is kind of more near the beginning, and I would say like the earlier verses of the Shikshastakam are probably a bit more pertinent to our advancement. The first verse, of course, Cheto Darpana Marjanam Baba Mahadavagni Nirvapanam, is Caitanya Mahaprabhu kind of like listing a series of qualities of chanting the holy name. So he says, like, for example, it extinguishes the great forest fire, worldly life. It spreads the white lotus of good fortune. It cleanses the mirror of the mind. So he's listing off all these kind of amazing results of Shri Krishna Sankirtan, and this is done in order to, to evoke faith in the reader, because you hear all these wonderful things that happen from chanting just the glories of the holy name. So these verses in the beginning, they might be a little bit more pertinent to us. The second verse as well, where he feels some remorse for not, being attracted to all these things, and then it's especially the third verse. This is, like Guru Maharaj has said, the third verse in a sense is really the key to the Shikshastakam. But it's, at all stages of advancement, all the verses of the Shikshastakam are relevant. It's not that some of them are relevant at some point and others are not, but certainly someone in an advanced stage would find a lot of relevance in the earlier verses, and someone in the earlier stages would also find a lot of relevance in the later verses. But it's a little bit like the earlier verses might be a little bit more useful to us. So the first verse ends kind of saying exclusive Sri Krishna Sankirtan triumphs over all. That's the line Ram Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. So a couple things with that is that it gives us the goal, basically, of, the goal of the Shikshastakam is Padam Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam, complete, full, unmotivated, uninterrupted chanting. Haitukiya apratiyata, Sankirtan. That's what san means complete, and kirtan, glorification, kirtan. So when he says, Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam, it doesn't mean it means victory to complete chanting. So that can be thought of as Sankirtan as we think of it, maybe like devotees going out on the street, but it certainly doesn't refer to devotees taking over the world by going out on Sankirtan or some kind of idea like that. It's more that it refers to complete chanting. So that can only, complete chanting kind of for oneself, perfected chanting, the completely pure chanting. But what that also means, or what it also entails, of course, is that complete chanting can only happen in the association of devotees. So then we see Sankirtan. It also means chanting with others. So this complete glorification, this complete kirtan, Sankirtan, can only really happen in the association of devotees. And in order to have perfect chanting, with the devotees, and to do that, in order to really take advantage and be in the association of the devotees, we need to have the four qualities that are that are mentioned in verse 3. So there's humility, tolerance, not desiring respect, no pratishta, and then offering respect to others. And then the fifth is a little bit apart and somewhat in a different category, but that's constant chanting. But to be in the association of devotees and to really take advantage of being in the association of devotees, certainly we need to have the four initial qualities mentioned in verse 3. And whoa, my chair sunk. Hold on. So Mahaprabhu, he then goes on to trumpet the glories again further in the second verse, right? He says, the second verse, he goes on to say that there are no hard and fast rules for chanting the name. There's no, all of the powers, all of the shaktis, so many names this is how Guru Maharaj translates it, so many names you've manifested and invested in them all your power. There's no hour, no rule to recall them. So again, he's kind of, the glorification of the first verse is spilling over into the second verse, where he's saying this, Nam Namakadi Bahula Nija Sarva Shakti, all of your power is in this name. But then there comes this big shift, right, in the second part of the second verse, where he starts to feel remorseful because he's just given this long verse in the first verse and continued on in the second verse, trumpeting kind of these glories of the holy name. But then in the second half of the verse, it shifts and he plunges into an ocean of despair, Guru Maharaj says, where he goes, "Oh Bhagavan, your mercy is so great, but just see my fate and misfortune. For your name I have no attraction." So Mahaprabhu then shifts into this these intense feelings of what would be the right, despair, and we start to see humility here. So it brings us to a point that we're all familiar with. One of the reasons why the third verse of the Shikshastakam is so important to us, this is, at least for most devotees and for myself, really where we find ourselves. We have a lot of knowledge from the grace of our teachers and our gurus about the glories of the holy name, the path of bhakti and whatnot, yet but still we find ourselves not where we would like to be, and it's very consoling to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is laying this out for us. He's we can kind of identify with him here. So this is a really important point in the Shikshastakam, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has presented the problem kind of, and he gives the solution in the next verse, which is the verse under discussion today, the third verse of the Shikshastakam. Why, despite all the glories of Sri Krishna Sankirtan, in the first verse, in the second verse, why do we have no taste for it? This is Mahaprabhu's doubt. So it's an interesting point, actually. Even here, here Mahaprabhu has a doubt. Guru Maharaj often says, it's okay to doubt, that one should come to the Guru and place one's doubts. So doubting is not necessarily a bad thing. Here we see Mahaprabhu, having some doubt. So Guru Maharaj explains this in terms of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. That the thesis is given in the first verse by Mahaprabhu. The antithesis is the doubt that Mahaprabhu raises here, that despite all of this, I have no taste for it. And the synthesis, or the Siddhanta, comes in the next verse in the terms of the solution to the problems. And the Siddhanta is that, Guru Maharaj explains this, that it's that the name must be approached with humility, found at the end of this second verse, and especially expressed in the first verse. And what it implies is that one must humble oneself before the bearer of it. So one must humble oneself before the holy name, but also the one who brings us the holy name, the Vaishnavas, and ultimately the Guru. So this is kind of just like a lead up of where this verse falls in the context of the Shikshastakam. So just by looking at the verses leading up to it and where it's found in the sequence, where it's located in the sequence, we kind of start to get an idea of why it's so important to the devotees, and see some of its beautiful characteristics. I guess just generally why it's so important to the devotees is because it gives us the solution. Well, one, it gives us the solution to the predicament that most of us find ourselves in, that we're dealing with the fact that we don't have taste, or our taste is at least fleeting or unsteady, and that we're dealing with the reason why this is happening is because we're dealing with anarthas and aparads, and that's what the word durdaivam, this misfortune, refers to. It refers to these anarthas, or misplaced values that we carry on with us, that help create kind of this the false ego, which is just like a dead weight that we're carrying with us. So it's nice to see where this verse falls in the Shikshastakam, because it's a real help to us. It describes like the solution and the tools that we can use in order to overcome our offenses and get to the stage of Nishta, get to the stage of being fixed in our practice, which Guru Maharaj has described as kind of the interim goal. But the other thing it does is it also gives the symptoms of someone who is chanting offenselessly. So it's kind of two things at once. From one side, it's telling us, use these tools and qualities in order to overcome your offenses, and you will get to Kirtanaya Sadahari, offenseless chanting. And it also describes the characteristics and qualities of someone who is doing that, who is constantly chanting the holy name. So these are some of the beautiful characteristics of the verse. I was kind of thinking about, I was trying to come up with kind of some things that I wanted to talk about why this verse is special. So this is kind of just like locating it first in the Shikshastakam. And so some things that I found that were really nice about this verse is that it really runs through, and I'll kind of go into them in more detail as we go through these classes, is that it really runs through the beginning, the middle, and the end of our practice. It's like a thread. It's a thread that's with us throughout all of our sadhana, from being a neophyte to making some progress, and we find this verse really embodied and just as important in the not the end of our practice, because the practice never ends, but that's the point, kind of, is that the verse never ends. It's not something just found in the earlier stages, but it follows the devotee on into eternity, basically. So that was one thing. Like I mentioned, it gives the method in order to deal with offenses. Our problem are these obstacles and whatnot on the path of bhakti that are preventing us from going forward. And this is kind of like Umar said, the key to the Shakshastakam. This gives us the method to deal with offenses, and ultimately, the path to pure chanting. I think Umar has described it. I forget how he said it. It was very poetic, though. That this paves the way to offenseless chanting. And these four things: humility, tolerance, the lack of pratishta, and offering respect to others according to their position. These can be used to combat all the challenges and all the baggage we experience in our practice. And I'll get into that later, but and it's also a really nice verse because it represents the stage of nishta, but it's a very, which is kind of like a stage that would be really great to get to. Gumarj describes nishta as, you're going up the hill, up the hill, up the hill, and when you get to nishta, basically you get to the top of the hill and you can see down where you're going, and there's momentum from there on. Until nishta, it can feel like pushing a boulder up a hill. Of course, it's not our effort that does that. It's mercy, but it's kind of like a interim goal. So it's a nice verse because it represents that stage of nishta, and it's an appropriate place to really apply some of our effort, to reach that goal. Gumarj has actually described this verse as the four regulative principles for the devotees. So when we hear four regulative principles, it can, most of us think of them as the way that Prabhupada described them. And it was kind of nice once when Gumarj came out and said, these are the four regulative principles for the Vaishnavas. It's to be humble, it's to be tolerant and merciful, mercy being an extension of tolerance. It's to not desire any attention for yourself, and also offer respect to everyone, as everyone is a resting place of Krishna. So if you follow these four, and constant chanting, of course, I'm not forgetting that one. That's the fifth one at the end. But so these five things are the regulative principles of Vaishnavism. And you'll find if you were to follow these perfectly, those other kind of a little bit more relative principles like, vegetarianism and some kind of constraint on sex, all these things, you would find that they fall within these five regulative principles. And these are another thing of this verse, of course, is these are really they're the regulative principles of the devotee, and they're also these are what ornament the devotee. These are the ornaments of the devotee. Like I was mentioning, they're the symptoms of offenseless chanting. So they're the route to get to offenseless chanting, but also they're the symptom of offenseless chanting. So they're the beautiful ornaments, of the devotees, of the sadhus. Sadhu Bhushanam. There's a nice verse I might quote later describing the ornaments of the devotees. It's not, the ornaments of the devotees is something more than jewelry and specific marks to identify yourself as one group or this group or that group, sectarian marks or sectarian haircuts. Sectarian is not a bad word. It's not a bad word at all. But there's more to the ornaments of the sadhus than that, and this verse is referred there. The other reason why this verse is very beautiful is that it really kind of encapsulates. I mean, not directly, but it kind of encapsulates this idea of the golden rule that we find, that pervades all religions. Like these qualities, they are universally accepted as being good qualities, and Bhakti Vinod in relation to tolerance extends that to compassion and mercy. He finds the connection there, but also the idea, I think, of honoring others and showing respect to others. To truly respect someone else is not just to glorify them and say that you're great, but it's actually to acknowledge, their space, their being, and whatnot. So it ties it into this idea of that we find in all religions, that, you know, to treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. So, and you know, this is actually like this is what defines a real religion, because this is where you really find practical ego effacement. Guru Maharaj has said any religion, for it to be kind of like a real legitimate spiritual tradition, has to be an ego effacing tradition. And ego effacement is really done by following these types of golden rules that we find throughout all the world's religions, of treating others the way that one would want to be treated, or treating others better than how we would want to be treated. I just need some water. We have these cicadas here right now, and they're really loud. I don't know if they come through the microphone as loud as they come through my ears, but it's making me speak really loudly. My throat's getting sore. They start really hard in the morning, and then at noon they get really hard too. I mean, they're going all day, but it's like they're chanting Gayatri. In the morning they start going real hard, and they're going all day, but then right at noon they go real hard again, and then the evening artik, it's like right at 6 o'clock. At the 3 sandhyas they go nuts, but the last couple of years they've been going all day with waves of intensity at the Trisandhya. So yeah, anyhow, I was saying this, you know, these types of golden rules these are really kind of like the way that one practices ego effacement, some sort of active form of ego effacement, because you have to step outside yourself. You have to, you know, enshrine somebody else in the center, and displace yourself from the center. And like, that's the hallmark of any kind of real religion. So I think this is a really nice verse in that sense. And also in that sense, just because it's a really simple verse, and it's a really simple definition of the religion of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we have a very complicated theology, very, you know, in-depth lists, and I mean, it's beautiful, and it's beautiful, but sometimes it's nice to just have like a very simple definition of what the religion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. If somebody asks you, what do you believe in, you know, it's nice, you can just reply with this verse: Trinada Pisunichina Tarori Vasahishna Amani Namanadena Kirtaniya Sada Hari. I believe in humility, tolerance, not expecting respecting everybody else, and constantly chanting the name of God. Now, I think it's a really nice definition, because I think most people in the world would really appreciate it if they were to ask you, what do you believe in? You know, and you responded with this verse: I believe in chanting the holy name of God and practicing these qualities. I think it would be very attractive, and people would really be able to get on board with it. It's like Bhakti Vinod sings in one of his songs, Jiva Doi Krishna Nam Sarvadharma Sat, that the essence of Dharma is Jiva Doi, compassion to jivas, and Krishna Nam. It's the same thing. It's kind of saying the same thing. So I appreciated this third verse in the sense that it was a really nice definition of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's religion, you know, and sometimes these simple, beautiful kind of things are more powerful than the complicated philosophical, theological descriptions. And the last reason that I kind of came up with that, why I really like this verse, was also because it's really the foundation that devotional communities are based on, and the way that they're sustained. So, you know, here we're trying to create a sustainable devotional community, and at the base of it there needs to be this. Another way of saying it is love and trust. Prabhupada said that's how you should run things, is through love and trust. But this verse clearly ties into all that, and is a really nice kind of like foundation stone for devotional communities, because devotional communities are really about relationships with devotees. They're not so much about pieces of land and buildings and whatnot, but they're how we behave and interact and treat other devotees. So I like this verse because it really shows how to sustain a devotional community. So those were a couple things about it, but I thought we would start looking at this verse, exploring this verse by seeing its importance by the sheer number of times that it's quoted in the Caitanya Charitamrita. Now you can understand that something's important through repetition, especially in our tradition. Repetition is a big key. So we find, this verse has been quoted 3 times in the Caitanya Charitamrita. Now I didn't have a chance to go and look and see what other verses are quoted 3 times. There's certainly verses that are quoted twice. We came across one just in our readings of the first of the Adi Leela the other day. I forget what it was, but it is found 3 times in the Caitanya Charitamrita. Guru Maharaj shares about how he was a young man and he started reading the Caitanya Charitamrita for the first time. He was enthused because he found all the important verses were kind of compiled by Krishnadas Kaviraj, and of course all of his own original composition, but he took verses from the Bhagavatam and verses from the Gita and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as well, and it was all found in the Caitanya Charitamrita. Guru Maharaj found this very enthusing. So this verse, like I said, we find it 3 times throughout the text. Now, when something is repeated 3 times, it means that it's very important and that one should pay attention there. There's a lot surrounding this verse that our acharyas are saying, pay attention to this verse, pay attention to this verse. It says it itself actually in the first quoting of this verse, in the first place that it's found in the Caitanya Charitamrita. The importance of something being repeated 3 times is emphasized in that context. You probably know where it's found or the verse. Probably the most famous verse that has something repeated 3 times. It has it repeated 3 times within the verse. Harinam, Harinam, Harinam eva kevalam kalo nastyeva nastyeva nastyeva. That verse, right? We find it repeated 3 times in the first part of the verse and 3 times in the second part of the verse, to make the emphasis, the importance. And that's where we find the first time the Trinada Pi Sunichena verse is quoted in the Caitanya Charitamrita. That would be in the Adi Leela chapter 17. It's called The Pastimes of Lord Chaitanya in His Youth, and it's verse 31 where it's quoted. But this section is like a brief recounting of earlier pastimes of Mahaprabhu. It's kind of like a summary. I think the idea is that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami didn't know how long he was going to live, so he went through kind of a quick recitation of Mahaprabhu's verses, and then kind of went back and kept writing. I think that's one way to think about it. Or he just had so much taste, he wanted to recite all the pastimes of Mahaprabhu first before getting into the heart of the book. But it tells the story of Mahaprabhu. It starts by just recounting very briefly the story of Mahaprabhu eating the raw rice given to him by Shuklambar Brahmachari. And then he very elaborately explains the Harinama verse, mentioned, that famous verse that I cited from the Brihad Naradiya Purana. So in that description of the verse, it comments, let's see, I have the Caitanya Charitamrita right here, this giant 1-volume edition, but it says in the description of the verse, it comments in the text here when describing the verse. It itself comments that kind of making the point that I'm trying to make here, that the repetition of something 3 times means that it's very, very important. So I'll just read it. I'll just read the English section for a moment. It says, after this incident, the Lord ate the raw rice given by Shuklambar Brahmachari and explained very elaborately the import of the Harinam Shloka mentioned in Brihad Naradiya Purana. So this is the verse. Harinam, Harinam, Harinam eva kevalam lo nastyeva, nastyeva, nastyeva gatir anyata. In this age of Kali, there is no other means for the realization of chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name of Hari. There is no other means of self-realization, And then it goes on with, this is actually another beautiful verse. Kali Kali Nama Rupa Krishna Avatar, Nama Haite Haya Sarva Jagat Nishtara. In this age of Kali, the holy name of the Lord, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, is the incarnation of Lord Krishna. Simply by chanting the holy name, one associates with the Lord directly. Anyone who does this is certainly delivered. This kind of gives a little bit of an insight into how one deals with one's offenses. The prescription for dealing with offenses is constant chanting of the holy name. And why is that? It's because the name and the named are non-different. Binapam nama namyo. So you're actually in if you're paying attention, you're in the presence of Krishna, and that's how one overcomes offenses. So that's given here, but then it goes, this verse, I'm just going to read the English here. It goes, this verse repeats the word eva, certainly 3 times for emphasis. And it also 3 times repeats Hare Nama, the holy name of the Lord, just to make the common people understand. The use of the word kevala prohibits all other processes, such as cultivation of knowledge, practice of mystic yoga, or performance of austerities and fruitive activities. This verse clearly states that anyone who accepts any other path cannot be delivered. This is the reason for the triple repetition, nothing else, nothing else, nothing else, which emphasizes the real process of self-realization. To chant the holy names always, one should be humbler than the grass in the street, devoid of all desire for personal honor, but one should offer others all respectful obeisances. A devotee engaged in chanting the holy name of the Lord should practice forbearance like that of a tree. Even if rebuked or chastised, he should not say anything to others to retaliate. For even if one cuts a tree, it never protests, and even if it is drying up and dying, it does not ask anyone for water. Thus a Vaishnava should not ask anything from anyone. If someone gives him something without being asked, he should accept it, but if nothing comes, a Vaishnava should be satisfied to eat whatever vegetables and fruits are easily available. One should strictly follow the principles of always chanting the holy name, and one should be satisfied with whatever he gets easily. Such devotional behavior solidly maintains one's devotional service. And then Trinada pi sunichena tarori basahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sedahari. One who thinks himself lower than the grass, who is more tolerant than a tree, and who does not expect personal honor, yet is always prepared to give all respects to others, can very easily always chant the holy name of the Lord. And then this is a beautiful verse too. Urdvabahu kari kahun shunyasarva loka namasutre ganti parakantiye shloka. Raising my hands I declare, everyone please hear me. String this verse on the thread of the holy name and wear it on your neck for continuous remembrance. So this is I just read you the section where the Trinada P verse first comes. So there's nice instructions in there about the verse, about the tolerance of the tree and whatnot. But what I found interesting mostly about this section is that it's emphasizing the triple repetition in the verse. So it gives credence kind of to the point that the Trinada P verse itself is repeated 3 times throughout the text. So I kind of said it explains why the chanting is so important, because Kali Kali Nama Rupa Krishna Avatar, it's the avatar of Krishna. It's Krishna directly, Nama Haite Haya Sarva Jagata Nishtara. This verse explains how the chanting of the Maha Mantra purifies one from anarthas. Those are what check our process really. And with the chanting of the holy name, one is associating directly with Krishna. Because like I mentioned, the name, the Lord and his name are the same. So it's, these are important instructions that he's giving here in this first recitation of the Trinada P verse, because it's explaining how to understand, how to move past offensive chanting. That's the subject of the 3rd verse. How to chant offenselessly, the symptoms of the offenseless chanter, as I've mentioned. The root cause of offensive chanting, according to Bhakti Vinod, is inattention. It's inattention. So it's like you're calling Krishna, who is directly non-different than his name. You're being inattentive. You're calling Krishna and then ignoring him. So it's pretty rude, really. Like, say you invite somebody to your house, and then once they get there, you ignore them. You can see how it's not it's not conducive to taking advantage of their company. So that's Bhaktivinoda describes that as the kind of root of offensive chanting. But the other side of the coin is that, if you're paying attention, being in the presence of the name is the same as being in the presence of Krishna. And that's why these things of humility and tolerance and stuff naturally arise. Prabhupada says it in the purport here. He says that actually, but one actually engages in chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, the quality of forbearance automatically develops. A person advanced in spiritual consciousness need not develop it separately, for a devotee develops all good qualities. And that's one way to look at it. One can also cultivate these qualities, though, because they are conducive to bhakti. But it is true that they are natural kind of products, because when you're in direct association with Krishna, your real position becomes clear. It's a natural humility is kind of fostered if you're paying attention to the fact that you're actually in having audience with Krishna, you're actually in his presence. Your real position becomes clear. The false ego, it's just it's totally useless. And when the false ego is gone, then, fear is gone. It's an amazing thing what the false ego does and what the troubles it causes us. So, being in the presence of Krishna, this natural humility arises, fear disappears, pride disappears. That's why this is the whole key to the Shakshastakam. That's why Gumar said this third verse is the whole key, the key to complete chanting. So like we saw, the text then goes on to explain how the verse repeats Eva 3 times, it repeats Harinama 3 times, it explains the use of the word Kevala. Gurumaj, in relation to this verse, is nice. He says that, well, it kind of says that in the text too. This repetition also means not by gyan, not by yoga, not by karma. So this whole section basically, again, puts emphasis on this triple repetition. The example of the tree is given as tolerance. And in fact, the 5 qualities described in the verse, this Trinadapi verse, I guess I kind of made this point, is that they come from both ends. They come as a practice, like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati has said that the third verse teaches one how to rise to the platform of offenseless chanting. It's a teaching on how to chant without offenses, and it's also the symptoms that come naturally. Then going on here in verse 29 and 30, he utters the verse, and then Krishnadas, I quoted it in the Bengali because it's such a beautiful verse, but Krishnadas himself kind of, speaks these very beautiful words, emphasizing again the importance of this. He said, I'll read it again. Urva bahu karikahun shunya sarva loka nama sutre ganti parakanti e shloka. That's like one of the most beautiful verses in relation to the Trinadapi. He says, raising my hands, I declare, everyone please hear me. String the verse on the thread of the holy name and wear it around your neck for constant remembrance. So by doing that, by saying I'm raising my hands, he's drawing attention to himself as the speaker and loudly declaring something as if you were in the street trying to get people's attention. And the I don't know what the literary term here is, but comparing it to the string that one places the holy name on is, I don't know what that is I guess it's just anyways, I don't know anything about literary terms, but it's a beautiful one, nonetheless, that he refers to it as basically the Kanti Mala, that you should string the verse of the holy name and wear it around your neck like a Kanti Mala. So it's interesting that the Kanti Mala is not just this. It's not just wearing the external ornaments of a devotee are the Sika and the Kanti Mala. And here Krishnadas Kaviraj is saying, well, the Kanti Mala is not just the Tulsi beads. I mean, those are very special and beautiful and protective and, part of the sadhaka day and whatnot. But he's saying, it's not just the Tulsi beads. You can get all kinds of fancy Tulsi beads these days. I mean, all kinds of beautifully carved ones. You just like go online and all kinds of beautiful beads. Recently I saw pictures from of sadhus just like covered in branches, almost like so many beads upon beads upon beads upon almost branches. Like they look like a walking bead store almost. So it's all very nice and very, very beautiful, part of the sadhaka deha in an esoteric sense. But this is kind of a different type of Kanti Mala that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is suggesting here. He's suggesting that the Kanti Mala here is this verse: humility, tolerance, constant chanting, not looking for respect, giving respect to others. Bhakti Vinod, and I'm not sure where he says it, but I know he refers to disciples of Kali Chela, that people can have a Sika, they can have a Kanti Mala, and they can look like a Vaishnava, but really they're just disciples of Kali. So they don't even, if somebody doesn't have these qualities, or is at least not kind of striving in the direction of these qualities, then the external symbols are like, well, I mean, they're special, but they can also be neither here nor there. I remember we were talking once with Gurmaraj. I can't remember exactly what it was about, but it was about precious metals. I know that. I don't remember if we were talking about jewelry for the deities, or maybe we're talking about Krishna's favorite metal, because I know we have a puja set all in copper, and I think it says in the Bhakti, what's that book called again? Just escaped my mind. Anyways, that Krishna's favorite metal is actually copper, not gold or whatever. We're talking about how there's bronze, and more valuable than bronze is silver, and more valuable than silver is gold. And Guru Maharaj said, yeah, but what's more valuable than a gold? Or he was saying, do you know what's more valuable than a gold necklace? I think we were talking about jewelry, actually. And we were thinking, I don't know, platinum? I don't know what's more valuable than a gold necklace. And he said Tulsi. Tulsi is more valuable than gold. For many reasons. It identifies devotees, Vaishnavas. It's part of the sadhaka deha, like I described, also in a kind of esoteric sense, Gaur Lila. It's suggested in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So, he made a really nice point there, that, when we think of value, gold, silver, actually Tulsi's more valuable than gold. I remember it, that I appreciated that point, partially because I really like gold. But anyone can put that on. Anybody, you can just go anywhere and to the shop. You can go to krishnaculture.com and just like have Tulsi malas sent to your house and put them on, sent right to your mailbox. But the Kanti Mala that's being described here is not so simple. It's not so easy either to put on. It's not easy to practice or to embody these principles. It's easy to be tolerant when there's nothing to tolerate. Or it's easy to be humble when there's nobody to humble yourself in front of. So it's very easy to kind of like fool yourself into thinking that one's tolerant if you have nothing to tolerate. But it's a different thing. So I don't know. I guess it's getting to be 11:30, so I should probably stop. I didn't get nearly as far as I thought I would. This is just the first place that this verse is quoted. So I'd like to go through the other places that the verse is quoted. I'd like to speak about the different lines that are actually given in the, talk a little bit about grass, talk a little bit about trees, stuff like that. And I'd also like to talk about, I think, Rupa and Sanatana Goswami as kind of character studies of humility and tolerance. But it seems like we're out of time. So I'll just stop there and we can pick it up again. I'll ask if there's any comments or questions or corrections. But I'm not exactly sure how to do that. Hey, Sham, how do I get questions?
Huh?
How do I get questions or comments?
Well, the written ones in the chat.
Okay, maybe there are none.
And if they want to mute themselves, they can mute themselves.
They can unmute themselves? Okay. Well, if you can unmute yourselves, if anybody has any comments or questions or would like to correct anything I said, please feel free. No? There's nothing?
Oh, also the body.
That's us, I think. Okay, well, thank you very much.
There's nothing? Oh, also the body.
Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripasindhudayavata patitanam padmebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you. Bye. See y'all later.
Gaurasundara Prabhu ki jai.
Bye.